Hi, everyone. Come on in, take a seat. I'm just gonna wait a minute or two before we get started, and you can feel free in the meantime to pop questions in the Discus chat or on the YouTube thread whenever they come up, and my team is gonna help feed them to me. I'm just gonna share some of my thoughts, and then we will chitty chat for a while about health reclamation. And then before we wrap up, I just want to teach a very simple, very basic, but I think very high impact breathing practice for a minute or so before I send you on your way. So we'll get started in just about a minute and a half. Welcome, everyone. I'm just waiting a moment because people kind of trickle in, so get started in a minute. All right, let's do this. Cool. So welcome, everyone. I got dressed up for you today because I went to work out this morning and I grabbed this t-shirt and it says, "The world is waking up." And I got it from our friends Kimberly and Foster behind the Thrive movie. If you saw that first documentary, it's incredible. And I had the privilege of being shot for the second one, which is about to come out. And a lot of truth coming through those folks. And this t-shirt is probably, I don't know, a couple years old. And I was thinking, wow, it's actually happening now. Now it's really happening. I mean, so many of us have been on this path, this bumpy, windy, sometimes torturesome path of awakening for years. I know for me and my intimates, and I imagine this may be true for a lot of you because, there could be many reasons, including astrological reasons, but the past 10 or 11 years have been particularly intense in terms of just every time you think you're in the clear, there's like another layer being torn from you, and you get a little bit closer to who it is that you are. And that requires the death of who it is that you thought you were. And that sounds very poetic and mystical, but it can be a harrowing experience of really vulnerability that we're never trained or encouraged to tolerate, let alone embrace as children, right? So we're encouraged to get it together, stop crying, and behave. We have, for the most part, I would wager the vast majority of us, if not all of us, were raised in obedience-oriented households. And that sounds so obvious that it's almost so commonplace that you would think, well, what other kind of household is there? But the truth is there are other ways to encourage the connection with the self, with intuition, with that inner compass, to encourage children to learn to listen to their bodies, to love their bodies, to understand their bodies as fully equipped and totally wise. We just didn't have that experience. And that's, I think, the driver of a lot of pain and confusion, and certainly a lot of what we call mental illness, and also a lot of what we call even just chronic illness in general. So in my experience, those of us who are on this path, which certainly includes all of you, or you wouldn't be here listening on a Saturday afternoon, we are waking up perhaps to the areas where we still have a bit of a blind spot, or we just haven't been ready to fully exercise our sovereignty in a couple of these other areas. You know, like for me, it's definitely been in the educational arena, learning about things like unschooling as the natural correlate to so many of the other things I've dedicated myself to learning about growing my own food, learning about non-fiat currency, so other forms of anything from gift economy to cryptocurrency, et cetera. And also learning about, community and community building, which for me involves learning Spanish. And so I have this experience of being a total novice, like bottom rung of expertise in so many areas of my life right now that I am putting my energy. And I wonder if for some of you, the health and bodily reclamation area, it's like you've known it's really important. It's a really big piece of the puzzle, and maybe you've kind of dabbled here and there or seen a functional medicine doctor or a naturopath along the way, or maybe you really love acupuncture, but you just haven't had that clean sweep experience of cutting all the dysfunctional cords of dependency. And many of them have to do with our relationships with certain providers and clinicians. But some of them actually have to do with just our relationship to ourselves and the way that we talk to ourselves about this body, about being in this body, and also the way we talk to ourselves when we are not feeling in connection to a flow of our own inner energy. Right. So whether that's poor concentration or fatigue, or maybe it's the consequences of not being on rhythm in the day, or that you're up in the middle of the night. Maybe it's addictive patterns around food or drink, or maybe it's just persistent anxiety. I know I've certainly had the experience of feeling so uncomfortable in my own skin that I can't be around anyone else. I can't even pretend. And then I can't even be around myself. So it's this feeling of being trapped, right? And what I think on a soul level, so many of us long for in this moment in time, the invitation that comes with all of the, the pressure of medical tyranny is this innate drive towards freedom. We are born longing for it, loving it, seeking it, and some of us more than others based on how it was that we were raised. But the freedom begins with with self-sovereignty, right? So it begins with not outsourcing agency. Because when you can be convinced that you're weak, that you're broken, and that you need any outside authority in order to be okay, you are owned. It's done, already done. And you can be controlled, you can be manipulated, you can be abused, and you can remain so enculturated into those dynamics that you actually develop what is referred to as Stockholm syndrome, where you go on to defend the abusing agency, entity, or authority, right? Any of you seeing that go on right now? Right? So this is so deeply rooted in our collective experience of childlike dependency on our caregivers that we were never emancipated from, right? So the example that I've used is like, it's kind of like we're like 45 years old, living in our parents', home in their basement, and they're starving us, right? So we're not nourished. They're beating us, right? So we're abused, and we otherwise have nothing but the agenda of survival every day. We have no experience of fulfillment or happiness or even the self. And the truth is that, when you're encouraged to leave, you might say, well, but how am I going to survive out there? I can't. I don't know how to survive. I don't have any skills. I don't have education. Like, I've just been in this basement. I don't know. I have to stay here. And plus, they love me. What do you mean? Like, yeah, once in a while, like, I don't know, I say something stupid, and so I deserve what I get. And the truth is that to take the leap to leave is so much harder than you might imagine from the outside in, because of how deeply rooted that dysfunctional bond is in our psyches. And so that dramatic example on a smaller level is what plays out with the medical system, where we run to our doctors, we run to the hospital, we look to mainstream media to educate us about health and biology. We even take tips from pharma zone, from their own advertising, right? Or we at least somehow allow ourselves to be permeable enough to be easily indoctrinated and brainwashed around what it is that they believe is wrong with us, our chemical imbalance, our clogged arteries, our dysfunctional, fragile immune systems. And we lean on that psychology when we are afraid. So when we are in our limbic system, in our animal brain, which is very easy to do because you just introduce the fear of death, which is something that on a large scale, we have not made any sort of peace with, because we imagine it to be the end of the material life, right? So if death is the end of the material life and I am not connected to anything else, I'm just, this discrete mass, and it's every man or woman for his or herself, then of course it's something to be afraid of, and so is everything that might even suggest that it's coming. And we've also been, really encouraged to worship at the altar of scientism, right? So no other religions are really allowed. And not that I'm a big advocate of denominational religion by any stretch, but no other religions are allowed. And that's why churches are closed right now and Walmarts are open, because scientism is itself the religion of the secular sciences, right? So this is what we are allowed to believe in. We are not allowed, according to our parentified authorities, to hold other beliefs about health and wellness. And I've also said, that our government and medical agencies would be hard pressed to define health as anything, literally, think about it, anything other than the absence of death. That's health to them, them in quotes, right? So you may be somebody who defines that differently, either intuitively, or maybe you've even written books about it, or maybe you're a practitioner and you've seen it and lived it. But you may also be somebody who has been conditioned to put yourself last and to derive fulfillment from service, from the savior role, right? How are you doing good in the world? How are you helping others? Because caring for yourself, and it's not just this like trite thing like, oh yeah, self-care, of course it's important. No, and this is it. This is it. This is where it begins and ends. And when I myself, get caught up into some sort of field of activism where I think there is anything more important, an article to write, a video to make, an email to send, anything more important than the pillars of my self-care, then whatever it is that I'm doing in the world is contaminating the field. I know that. I've seen that. And, as Nietzsche says, it's very easy for us to become the monsters that we fight. And it happens when you deprioritize your self-care. So how is it that we get beyond the resistance that comes up? And how do we begin to walk the walk of health reclamation, bodily sovereignty, and personal freedom? It starts really simply. It starts with a really, really simple, short, in my experience, 1 month commitment that is a fierce commitment. It's a choice. And your power of choice is your superpower. It is your superpower. Nobody can take that from you, because even if you feel like you don't have choices in terms of your expressed behavior, you always have a choice about how you are going to narrate what's going down, right? What attitude you're bringing to the table. And that is the piece that accompanying these lifestyle choices that, can be ritualized and really made beautiful, really made interesting, really made sacred, right? Accompanying these simple choices that you make, you're already making them every day. So how can you make them conscious? How can you bring awareness to these choices so that you begin to care for yourself as if you were like a newborn baby? And you begin to grow that nurturance, that soft heart, with also that strong spine of discipline, choice, and commitment. It's essential that you be held in like-minded community. And in my experience, one of the things that Sayer and I bring to the table that I think is extremely unique, and I'm not sure there are many other examples out there. Certainly, a colleague, Sachin Patel, comes to mind. There are certainly people on our page who have public offerings, but not many who share our passion for the let's say, I don't know how to say this clearly, like the absence of carve-outs, right? That there are no exceptions to what can be healed, period. And that there are no situations where, in terms of chronic health and illness or whatever you want to refer to it as, where pharmaceuticals are necessary. So that's a radical perspective. And that may not be your belief system. But if it is, we have your back. And our team is, I think, quite expert at holding that container strong. Because the message that you send yourself when you are engaging the field of conventional medicine and pharmaceutical medicine is necessarily, and I've gotten a lot of pushback for this, and I understand it because I was a pill prescriber for many years, so much so that I became expert in prescribing to pregnant breastfeeding women. So I understand that this can be feel like an affront. It can feel like a judgment. It's just a different belief system. And these are all belief systems. So it's time to get clear on what your beliefs are and then recruit help in living them so that you can integrate all of the dissonance. You can resolve all of the blind spots, and you can begin to do the absolute best that you can to live your beliefs. That doesn't mean you're not going to have scary moments or difficult moments. That doesn't mean that there aren't going to be consistently ways that you wake up to how you were asleep still. This happens to me on a daily basis. I am under no illusion that I am awake, because for everything I've reclaimed, right? For everything I've remembered about how to be a human being, there are, 100 more every week that I feel not quite ready to embrace. And it feels overwhelming and confusing, and maybe later, and I'm doing good enough, whatever, I'm getting by. But there may be a moment where when it comes to making a truce with this body and mind, where you're like, all right, enough excuses, it's time. And in my opinion, my humble opinion, on a collective level, this is it. And that's why, we scheduled this, experience for Vital Mind Reset with added support in the form of circles, with Jamie. We scheduled it knowing, we already knew what was going down. So it was post-March, knowing that whatever was going on in September, it was going to be real. And that there's no time to waste anymore. You cannot do this later. You cannot do this next year if you want to generate this force field of, no, this is mine. This is mine. Step off, right? If you don't even know what I'm talking about, then there's certainly a lot, that I can share and help with in terms of natural medicine and science-based lifestyle choices, and certainly about the considerations around pharmaceuticals, and share with you the possibility for what you could engage if you choose to work with natural healing and detox from conventional medicine. But there are probably a lot of you who are like, okay, what can I do right now? Things are not going in a way that feels comfortable for me. And I am struggling, myself more than ever, because I just don't feel like I can live in this world this way. I mean, I certainly relate to that. And that's where pulling your energy back from awareness generating and study of what's happening, exploration and research, pulling just a little bit of that awareness back and recentering it on your own nurturance is a radical act. And it's one that the world feels. I believe that passionately. It is, it's why I've said so many times that self-care is radical activism. Because if you clean your house up, and it's not hard, but it's also, it's not easy either. It's a conscious effort, and the attention that you pay. That's also why, we've restructured things. So we've been able to offer a sliding scale for the first time in the history of this program, Vital Mind Reset. However, it has to be a little uncomfortable because it has to vectorize your energy, right? I have given Vital Mind Reset for free to a number of friends and colleagues. I have not gotten a single word of feedback about how it has helped them. Never, not one time. And, we have literally history-making cases, so many that I can't even keep up with the publication of them. So that investment, that vectorization, that part of your consciousness that says, this is what I'm doing in September, this is what I'm doing for myself. This is what I'm doing for the collective, so that I don't go and dump my fear and garbage all over the world and my family and my friends and myself, so that I don't waste any more money or time or emotional, duress on doctor's visits or prescriptions or hospitalizations, or the like hovering sense that the other shoe is going to drop at any moment. So why would I engage fully in life right now? Right? There's so much cost to living indoctrinated in that model. And a big part of the model is that clinicians, because they are intelligent and highly trained and vetted, and they have experience, and all of those things are true, that they could possibly know more about your body and your mind than you do. It is a lie. It is a lie. You are, and this is not just a trope, you literally are the only one who knows what's going on with you. And learning the language of your symptoms is a lifetime experience, right? But you'll get to the point where, because you've given yourself this month at some point, and you can always re-engage it, but really it's meant to be done one time, you begin to learn to read that intuitive response, right? So there was an event I was supposed to go to today, right? And I planned to, it made sense for all of my values and priorities. And there's just something that bubbled up and said, don't go. I literally don't rationally know. I can make up reasons. I don't even know why, but I know to listen to that. And I've had 100 times of the opposite happen, where I can make 100 excuses why I don't want to participate in something. And it's like, yeah, show up, about decisions around the seriousness of, anyone else's, your pets, your children, also known as animals, your children, whether to invest here or there, whether to take this class or not. Your body can become your divining rod, and your intuition will speak to you in this quiet, assured way that you literally cannot hear through the white noise of all the brainwashing, but also through the white noise of the chronic symptoms, the bloating, the brain fog, the way that your nervous system has been hijacked by a non-ancestral diet and a lifetime of not meditating, or a toxic burden. That's a very real thing. And I've learned, my approach to detox from my mentor, Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez. He never shared it publicly. And I feel very strongly that it be reserved. It's the only part of the protocol that's not in my books, that it be reserved for like-minded community in a very sacred place and space. So it's the only, place that I offer it, and it's a game changer. I have many of my friends who practice Nick Gonzalez's approach to detox just because, they feel the difference, and not because they are, struggling with pharmaceuticals and so-called mental illness. So I want to share a quote, and then I want to take some questions. So feel free to pop them in the chat. And I know it's always kind of funny because there's two, there's Discus and there's YouTube, but we will recruit them. So it's a Joseph Campbell quote, and he says, "We are not on our journey to save the world, but to save ourselves. But in doing that, you save the world. The influence of a vital person vitalizes." And I love that. It's such a reminder of what I've been describing to you all, because I can certainly get into a place where I feel like, oh, but if, how many of you can relate to this? Like, oh, but if they just had this information, if they just watch Plandemic 2, or if they just read this article, then they'll get it. And then they'll wake up. And then I will live in a safer world, because not only will I be able to connect to that person, but I also will have done my part to grow the light. And unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way. And you can take it from me because, I have been trying that approach for many years. And I've pivoted towards focusing on this kind of work, because I know that if, like Bucky Fuller says, like if we just create the new system that renders the existing system obsolete, we don't have to do any fighting. We don't have to do protesting. We don't have to scream at our legislators. Yeah, there's a role for that now, because we don't have a clear vision on what it is that we're creating. I know in meditation that I offered recently, it's not hard to kind of sit with the felt experience of what we want, and if you're anything like me, it has something to do with, a fertile green landscape and kids running around and drums and dancing and, abundant food and the experience of inner dependency, which is ultimately the experience of community. So it's that paradox of becoming fully your individuated self, but also feeling deep connection to other totally separate individuals who share your values. And that to me is a very important concept, and is something that underpins Vital Mind Reset and our membership community, Vital Life Project, which for those who don't know is more kind of living the life, bite-sized version of self-care challenges that we do together. It's where a lot more of the kind of activism stuff goes down. But we share core values of bodily sovereignty, of health freedom, and of personal responsibility. So, I was in a podcast recently, and the guy was like, I don't know what he said. He said something like, what feels better than when somebody admits that they're wrong? And I was just kind of like quipped, and I said, when you have the courage to admit that you're wrong, right? To take responsibility. It actually does. It feels terrible for like 5 minutes, literally. Feels like it's going to kill you for 5 minutes. But then when you start to understand how you are creating your experience and you're choosing it, and it's serving you, but chiefly it's serving your child self, once you get habituated at that, you become bionic because no one can blame you, shame you. You already own it all. And yeah, we're all full of all the stuff, the lying, the cheating, full of shameful stuff. We're all of it. And the difference between a sociopath and you, is that you may have ownership and awareness of those parts, or you may look for, work that helps you with that, which would obviously be, this path. But you also have your open heart, right? You also have that commitment to love and connection and finding it even when it's not visible. And that's an adult property, right? Because the child, when mommy leaves the room, cries existential tears because they don't understand mommy's going to come back until they have that permanence, right? But that's a bit what we struggle with as adults too. When we feel afraid, rejected, abandoned, we do not know how to experience love of self, let alone love of others, as a permanent thread. And so it might seem like, well, what does that have to do with going gluten-free? but it starts there, because until you can learn to honor yourself in these daily self-care rituals and send that signal of safety to your nervous system so that you can command the witness, you can command that undisturbed watching eye that is always okay, it's always cool, no matter what's happening, then you can't possibly master your emotions. You can't possibly make informed choices, and you can't possibly experience real love that isn't control. Most of us only know love as control. Who among us, has had an experience with family where when we disagree about something, there's a withdrawal of love, right? There's a cold wind, that enters the room. That withdrawal of love is conditional offering of love. And as parents, we have an opportunity to be heart open present, to our children, for example, even when we disagree with what it is that they're doing or how they're behaving. But the last thing I'll say is that I have found that so many of those who get captured by the medical system, but specifically by the psychiatric system, and by captured, I mean even prescribed one medication or labeled, they are exquisitely sensitive, right? I call them the canaries in the coal mine. And they are rightly sensitive to what is wrong. However, that empathic openness is a very hard way to live. It's an excruciating way to navigate the world. And so what happens is that the defenses that pile up to protect that vulnerable heart, can include things like entitlement, projection, where you judge and condemn that which you reject in yourself, in others. And also, they are very vulnerable to the validation that the conventional medical system offers. Like, oh, I told you something was wrong with me. I've always felt like something was wrong with me. You see, it has an ICD-10 code, right? And it even has medications that come with it that are going to help me manage this experience of me. And these labels and medications are so insidious because, unlike believing, if you're diagnosed with diabetes, that you have something wrong with your pancreas or something wrong with your thyroid or whatever, psychiatric medications really necessarily send the message that there's something wrong with you, who you are, how you are. And undoing that is a hero's journey home to self. We've also seen this path, trodden by hundreds. So we know, Jamie and I and our team, we know what this looks like. We know what it takes. And that's a big part of why we've refined Vital Mind Reset for this current moment. We used to offer a community on Facebook We've decided for ethical reasons to leave Facebook for our communities. We've done that, feels really good. And for this particular program and offering, we are doing, face visible, what do you want to say? Video circles, we call them. So group calls. And we think that, a chat is not going to cut it, for this process right now, in terms of feeling connected to other like minds who are walking this path of sovereignty, no excuses, no carve outs, no exceptions. And it really is like a deconditioning project. That's, I think, what it offers. It offers permission to believe that there's nothing wrong with you, and there never was. And that's what so many of the completers of this program or my former patients would say, I believe, is, that they were given permission to honor that intuitive voice inside that said there is another way. And none of what I was told is really true. Even though it felt kind of good for a second to believe it, there is a more empowering narrative out there. And it does involve me taking responsibility and not blaming my genes, my chemistry, my parents, or anyone else for anything that I experience ever. That practice, it's a practice, because every time we feel symptoms, every time we feel emotions, we go into the child self narrative that says, it's not fair, why me? This happens to me all the time, and I've been dedicated to this work for many, many years. It still happens. And the only difference is that you watch it happen now because your nervous system is healed enough to cultivate that witness consciousness. And you turn towards your child self and her tantrum or his tantrum, and you soothe that child self. It's not anyone else's job. Just like it is not our government's job. It is not mainstream media's job. It is not your doctor's job. It is not Anthony Fauci's job. It is not Bill Gates' job. It is no one's job to care about you. That's like a hard pill to swallow, right? No pun intended. It's not. It's not their job. It's wonderful if they do, but sometimes that's even complicated, right? So, and it's not my job, by the way, either, right? So some of the trouble we've encountered in this program is when people replace their deified conventional doctor with me, and somehow I'm the one, who has all the answers and is going to make everything better and finally cares. No, I am not that person either. I am me doing my thing. And there may be times where me doing my thing is something you hate. And there may be times it's something you love. That's great. We are both sovereign entities, and we can do our best to connect, through unattached care and respect and reverence. And that practice, I think, is something that we are really, really dedicated to as a team, because there's so much victimhood out there right now. It's just running rivers, divisive rivers through, the fabric of our humanity. And so these little practices are, not only do you model it for others, but it's also a way to ultimately reclaim yourself from any of those childlike attachments and projections, any of that parentification that might otherwise happen. So that's a big part of what we focus on. And Jamie and I practice every day, even together as friends. So let's see. So I'm going to take a couple questions, and then I'll teach that quick meditation before we part. Okay. So let's see. Can this program help with teens? So I certainly am not making any guarantees, any promises, anything like that. I can only show you, what has come before. And I can also reference, the published studies, because many of you probably know that I have had a team of clinical angels who have devoted themselves to supporting me in writing up these history-making cases. And we actually just published, you might know, the first of its kind, actually ever, as far as I know, in history, randomized controlled trial for moderate depression. And in this trial, all of the treatment participants, so the Vital Mind Reset receivers, let's say, were on at least one medication and had at least 3 diagnoses. And within the 44-day span, on what's called a PHQ-9, which is a measure of assessment that's commonly used in these trials, they were 1 point away from remission and had more than 50% remission of their symptoms. So 1 point away from full remission in 44 days. To me, that's even shocking, because I never saw that in clinical practice. It always required at least a couple of months. But that to me is extraordinary because this was no doctor required. So I can only reference, this kind of these outcomes, and to suggest that if your teen is able to commit and comply, there's nothing in here that's beyond, high school science or anything like that. And what an amazing thing, to be exposed to these concepts this early in life. But we have an outcome. We just published it. Literally, I just got the paper, a schizophrenia outcome that was in a 21-year-old, and he only did the diet. And the outcome was so profound that we published it in the medical literature. So I know that is something to gauge expectations on. I am a Christian and very much believe in God as my protector. Will this belief be in conflict with your Vital Mind Reset program? That is a really, really powerful question. I do not think so. Again, I offend people just waking up in the morning. So I can't promise, that what we've written will be in perfect alignment. But we've had many, many, many people who identify that way, and even people who have chosen not to do Kundalini-based meditations, even though I don't invoke any of the, Sikh origins or mantra or anything like that. It's the medical form of Kundalini, the medical meditations, who have chosen not to do them, and it's not a problem. The commitment is just for 3 minutes a day of contemplative practice. I just provide ones that I'm familiar with and trained in. But I actually think there's something quite beautiful in having this overarching belief that all is in order, right? All is by design, and that there is a benevolence that is, overlooking. The challenge is when that protector gets projected onto other human beings or systems. I think that can be challenging, especially when those systems are government or the medical system. Because if you believe that those are here to protect you, right, and that what they're pulling right now has anything to do with your health or well-being, or a virus for that matter, that belief is the most disempowering posture possible. And that is how and why, through fear, we are being controlled en masse. And, medical tyranny is literally being ushered in. We are literally in the most incredible social engineering experiment of human history. And people don't even know it's happening. So that's more the specific concern I would have. Can this program in any way help a person who struggles with Lyme disease? That's a great question also. I am not a huge believer in what would be labeled Lyme disease. I'm also not a believer in conventional contagion or infection, and many associated pathologies and chronic illnesses. And the reason is because I am a terrain theorist, right? So I believe that there is something, and in the case of multiple chemical sensitivity, or what we call Lyme disease, there are so much body burden and psychic burden of trauma, chemical exposure, dietary driven inflammation, that was just the bite, so to speak, was the straw that broke the camel's back. And the part of the reason that I don't believe in the identification of chronic Lyme as a legitimate diagnosis is also because the diagnosis of it, the treatment of it. I mean, I have, friends and colleagues who consider themselves expert in this who would certainly disagree with me. It reveals the confusion, right? It reveals the fact that this label is being thrown on a big pile of asking to be healed imbalance. And the other reason is because when I worked with Nick Gonzalez, my mentor, for the last year of his life, he would treat Lyme disease the same exact way with the same exact protocol as he would breast cancer. And that tells me something. It means there's nothing to fight. There's no infection to resolve. All you have to do is send the body that comprehensive signal of safety, and then get clear on your own inner compass, and you will begin your lifelong process of continuing to heal, because you'll know exactly what you need. So that's my 2 cents on that. Can this program help with eating disorders? Do you find this program could be triggering to people recovering from eating disorders? Yes. This is a very common question, and it's very easy for me to answer because I operationalized this program for a decade in my practice before taking it online. And about a third of my practice at any given time was diagnosed with eating disorder, NOS, or bulimia, or anorexia, or both. Overeating, I think, is probably to a lesser extent, although there were a number of patients, I think, that fit in that category. I think we all have come to the table with highly dysfunctional relationships that are emotionally laden and pinned to our trauma histories that are then biologized, right? So when I was in my training, I was told, well, the way you treat an eating disorder, and specifically, let's say anorexia, but also bulimia, is you get the patient to tolerate eating the most triggering foods possible, donuts, candy, and just doing it. And so you desensitize them to their anxiety around that, and that's the treatment. Okay, how that makes sense to anyone who has any understanding of how inflammatory these foods are, how much they disturb, the very basics of gastro enterology, the very basics of digestion and signaling from gut to the brain, and satiety, and all of the roller coaster, that you can get strapped onto when you're eating these totally toxic, addictive foods is beyond me. What I have found is that the hard lines of discipline and choice have to come with the self-compassion of nurturance, right? And also with some degree of sacred attention. So when you are engaging this dietary protocol, yes, there are do's and don'ts. That discipline is an important element of navigating the world. If it comes from self-flagellation and self-punishment, yeah, it's going to just be a reification of a lot of those dysfunctional voices that are control-based, that have to do, with disordered eating. If we can begin to understand, oh, wow, of course I have these symptoms. Nothing is wrong with me. Of course I have them based on my history, my childhood, my programming, and then plus my sensitivity to the toxic elements of the American or Americanized lifestyle. That compassion plus the discipline is a formula that I found really works. And we've even published again on disordered eating resolution, that began with this program. Okay, what is the difference between VLP and VMR? Okay, so with the whole vital thing, I know there can be a lot of confusion, and we have this information in our FAQs and stuff in case you need to access it later. Basically, Vital Mind Reset is how I healed myself. So I had Hashimoto's diagnosis 11 years ago now, and this is the refined protocol that I did over months and months and months. It's a 1 month deep dive, deep end, go big or go home protocol. And it is very likely to change your life. It has done that for hundreds of people. And at this point, it has virtually nothing to do with me other than that I have established the field of belief that grew the field into possibility that now supports these outcomes on a regular basis. So this is not for everyone because you may not be ready, right? And while you have the program for life, what we're offering now is extra support on a weekly basis, live support. So it would be a shame. Also a shame for the collective, because we need you turned on, awake, and self-possessed and healing now. Like I said, I'm not sure we can wait until January. So that is, my plug for the timing of it. VLP is where a lot of folks come to Vital Mind Reset from VLP, and then they go to VLP after Vital Mind Reset. VLP is the living the life, right? It's where we hang out. It's where I hang out. I am very active in VLP. Sayer is in there too. We merged recently. So if you don't know, my husband from greenmaninfo.com and author of Regenerate, we do what we can to hold a really beautiful space for just living this kind of life. When you have these beliefs, how do we live this life, and how do we continue to commit to self-care and upping our game in that spiral path? So how do we look at the beverages we're drinking? How do we look at, are we grounding every, day? What time are we going to bed? And every month we have a new challenge and we focus on that. So that is the ongoing membership, and this is the deep dive. And I have found with this complementarity, including the fact, by the way, that a lot of this information and the protocol is in Own Yourself, my recent book. A lot of this information is in free blogs online and our downloads. There are many ways for you to access this when you're ready. And, we have outcomes of people who just did it from the book. But if you're somebody who needs connection and community, which I would argue is most of us right now, and Instagram and Facebook is just not cutting it, then this is a little menu of options. Okay, so I'm going to take one more question and then I'll just teach you this meditation. Okay, what about people who have been on meds for over 20 years? Okay, so this is where I'll point you in the direction, I just like spilled water all over my face. I'll point you in the direction of our published research, and we also have a lot of video testimonials. So if you just go to kellybroganmd.com, you'll see there's a pull down of success stories, and you will find that every single one, I think, of our published case reports, a lot of our video testimonials, and certainly the vast majority of my patients, because my patients for, the 11 years of practice are almost always like 42 to 55, I would say. And if you get started on meds because of a college breakup or disordered eating or, a difficult period, and premenstrual symptoms, then that's 20 years of life. So this is very common. And in fact, multiple meds are very common. And we have cases of people who were on like 5 meds for 25 years. The process of medication taper, in my opinion, begins with this month. Do not attempt it otherwise. That's my recommendation. It's my very biased perspective, because I only know that it works this way. And I know there are people who just like stop their meds and they're fine. And that's incredible. Wow. I have never treated one of those people, obviously, because I have the selection bias of working with people who've either tried that and it's not been successful, or who, are symptomatic and on meds, which is very common, of course, because of the nature of the way these medications work and generate symptoms themselves, and chronic ones at that. So our recommendation is that this is where you start. The ongoing experience of medication taper and medication taper support is largely outside of the purview of VMR, because VMR is just the beginning. But there are many, growing resources and many communities, et cetera, that are cropping up around that. But the truth is, you're going to know exactly what you need once you get connected to that inner compass. You're going to know. And so you're not going to like opt into that now because you don't know yet. You have to get connected to yourself first. So that's the place to start. All right. So I am going to show you the basics of a meditation called Caliber for Constant Self-Authority. This is a Kundalini meditation. And normally when I teach Kundalini, I don't do, tuning in or mantra. I keep it very accessible. and simple and basic. And, that may be offensive to hardcore practitioners, but I find that it's very effective this way too. So this meditation starts with a hand gesture, like a hand mudra, it's called. You put your thumb on the base of your pinky. And all of these points of stimulation, including when there is sound involved, have very specific effects on the endocrine system. So that's, to me, important, like that it's purposeful. So go like that, then go like this. And then you're going to just bring your knuckles together and the base of your palms. So try to keep them all together best you can. And then hopefully you can see me. You're going to bring this, not like shoulders up, like all weird, but bring this to your heart center. And I don't know where I can put this link. Maybe I can put it in the chat in case anybody wants to check it out later. Okay, so then you're going to do this form of breathing that sounds complicated, but you're going to catch on really quickly. Sorry, I didn't say it's your first knuckles, these ones. So you're not contorting your hands. So you breathe in through your nose, breathe out through kind of like a pursed mouth. Then breathe in through a relaxed mouth and breathe out through your nose. So in, out, in, out. Okay, so I'll narrate just a few rounds. And you might find, even if you get off this call and you set a timer for 3 minutes, if you try this, I have great confidence that you will feel a shift inside. And that's kind of where it's at, right? Because until you develop that watching eye and you can sit in Vipassana or you can sit in silence and go deep into the universal eye, right? It helps to just learn how to self-regulate. And these meditations I find are an incredible tool to just have in your pocket. You can literally go into a bathroom stall and do this for a few minutes and come out feeling more self-possessed, right? So you're not leaking your power, giving your power to somebody else who's triggering you, whatever. Okay, so a couple rounds. So it'll go like this. Inhale through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. Inhale through the mouth. Exhale through the nose. Nose. Mouth. Mouth. Nose. And that's it. And your eyes can just be relaxed. And you can try, I normally recommend starting with 1 minute or 3 minutes and just see if that gives you a little bit of a sense of like, oh, I am okay, you know? And sometimes it can be as simple as feeling so much turmoil, not having the wherewithal to recognize that that is old patterning coming up, asking for a different response. And simply looking around the room that you're in and recognizing that in this moment, you are okay. In this moment, you're okay. And even if you don't have the relatively peaceful conditions that probably most of us do right now, you can get to a place where even under duress, you can access that never disturbed self, that always okay self. And that's a big part of what starting with physical healing, starting with laying the foundation of physiologic balance and nervous system relief that comes with resolving thyroid imbalances and blood sugar imbalance and nutrient deficiencies and all sorts of side effects from toxicant burden. This is what we can accomplish in literally 1 month. The body is so forgiving. And then the process of self-possession and emotional mastery, it's a lifetime process, but it's so much easier around people who get it and who are doing that work too. It makes it feel so much safer to do it. And we deserve that. Before we go out as warriors and warrioresses on the battlefield and ready to take arrows from all over, like, don't we deserve a safe space where we can exhale knowing that we share values? I don't know. I feel we do. So I hope that you'll join us. I know that you all have access to our page, where you can check out a little more about the program. You can feel free to email us with questions at office@kellybroganmd.com and take advantage of the ways that we have done our best to make this as easy as possible and the barriers to resistance as low as possible, based on what we understand around the psychology of health reclamation, which is very complex and pulls on a lot of trauma strings, as you can imagine. So I hope that this has been helpful, and I'm sending everyone my love.